Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Abby Haggard, and this is my tiny corner of the world, little office in my little apartment in the capital of Canada. And the first thing I want to say to everybody is raise a glass, raise a cup, raise something to celebrate with our neighbors to the south. So many of my friends and fans and followers, and that sounds a bit weird, but there we are. Happy Thanksgiving, USA. Let's find all kinds of things to truly give thanks for, shall we? Cheers. Okay, so I have a fun thing I want to talk to you about today. The theme for our video, and by the way, for those of you who are just new, we're getting a lot of new people on LinkedIn. So thank you, LinkedIn. It's good to see you. I accidentally fell sideways into television quite a few years ago now because somebody said, we're looking for somebody, can you do it? And I said, is it legal and does it pay money? And the answer was yes to both. So there I was. And it ended up being a little show that was produced in Ottawa. It was a children's show, live children's show, and it was called You Can't Do That on Television. And, it was a small town. Ottawa's a fairly small town compared to all the big cities. And I figured who would see it. And then we got a distribution deal with this tiny little company that didn't have any shows at all. This tiny little company called Nickelodeon, right? And the next thing we knew, they had sub-licensed us to the U.S. Armed Forces Network, 53 countries around the world. Thank you very much. I got to look like an idiot. Thank you. All over the world. And then the internet got all excited about it. And the next thing I knew, it's now on YouTube, and it won't go away. The thing is that the story in the beginning, and this is our theme today, the story that we tell ourselves. The story in the beginning, and it was the little show that could. And we didn't figure that anybody would see it. And then all of a sudden, everybody can see it. And then all of a sudden, everybody can forever see it. And that changes the shape and the nature of all the decisions. When you look back, you think, would I have, and of course, that's just a ridiculous thing to go to, because if it could have, it would have. That it didn't meant that it couldn't and wouldn't. So here we are, we end up all these decades later, and there's all kinds of people who have come along and have reached out and said, pivotal moment for me. When I was in my 12s and my 10s and my 14s, I needed somebody to remind me of me. I needed to feel connected to something that felt me instead of all the weirdness around. So in a way, we were part of everybody's preliminary coming of age, working through puberty. And it's an honor to be part of that. So I want to thank everybody. I even want to thank Nickelodeon for changing the nature of my life. And I think it's important that we do that. I think every so often, even though, it's cold or we don't feel great or something we were really hoping for took a left turn at Albuquerque, it's important to say, yeah, I know. On the other hand, look at all this. Because you can't have Drek without wow. You can't have, philosophically speaking, you can't have dark without light. That's actually also physics. You can't have, rain without sun. You can't, like, everything has a one side and the other. And I always say, the coin is the metaphor of our lives, right? One side is up, the other side is down, and the side in the middle is the one we spin on, the one we can't decide what the hell we're doing. Anyway, so the theme today is, do your stories tell you who you are, or do they tell you who you were? Are they holding you back or inviting you forward? And quite often we don't pay attention to that. We keep saying, my family has always, and my uncle and I never would we ever change, except we do. Because if we don't change, we get left behind. So I wanted to give you the most brilliant illustration of, do your stories tell you who you are or who you were? Long ago, I was looking for a title for a marketing book. And I thought, I've got it. I've got it. It's going to be amazing. But then I look it up, you look it up to see. And somebody already had it. Somebody previous to me was clever. And I was so crushed. But then I was also curious because I wanted to see what they did with the title. So I bought the book. And now, after this sip, I'm going to show it to you. So this book is called The Viking Manifesto. Now, you can see why I wanted to use it as a marketing book. Me, the Viking, right? And there's the sword, right? And there's all the blood dripping off everything. Now, that's not the point. That's not the point. It says a call to arms for a new way of doing business. The Scandinavian approach to business and blasphemy. That's not the best part. The best part is written on the back. Now, the Viking Manifesto is marketing. It's marketing today. It's not taking us back to the days when the word brander was an Old Norse word, and it meant literally branding. It was spelled B-R-A-N-D with an R at the end. And it meant literally to be able to find your stuff in the marketplace with a whole bunch of stuff that was similar. So this is the point of the story question. Ready? Okay. It says, the Vikings used to drink the blood of their enemies from their empty skulls. That's true. That's a true, proven, saga-worthy ew. The Vikings used to drink the blood of their enemies from their empty skulls. Part 2. Now we sell furniture in flat boxes. And in case that didn't hit home, that's IKEA, right? That's IKEA. So with those little Allen keys that drive us crazy. Now, this is what I'm saying about enjoying the transition. Who we were is the foundation. You can't build a house without putting down some sort of a foundation. Whether you're building it in order to have a subterranean level, a basement, a storage, whatever it is, a wine cellar, you need a foundation upon which to build the solid home. And then after you have the foundation and you sink the posts and you do the right thing and you level everything, and then you begin to build your structure, you begin to build your story. So I am very interested in the Norse sagas because someone who did our family tree made me realize that I am from there. Now, not from there exclusively. There's all kinds of other influences that have made me whatever this is today. However, the primary is from a certain space on a certain bit of land to which many different kinds of people originally came and from which I emerged. Along the way, along a path, a tortuous path with all kinds of other influences. It's not pure, it's a blend, which is how all the best things become, correct? And what I was fascinated by when I realized that I had some sort of connection to Vikings was their tenacity, was their ingenuity, was their resilience, was their recognition that they may be living in a harsh climate. They may be living on land that is difficult to turn into anything but a lot of the rock that it is. So they looked around and they said, well, what can we do with it? Well, how can we take the best? And so they became good at a lot of things, not the least of which was fishing. And as they realized that a lot of their wealth and a lot of their support and their assets would be coming from the ocean, they put their minds together to figure out how to best utilize that, how to make better boats, how to overcome the challenges of navigation, how to be able to travel safely, more safely, how to be able to get back home, how to be able to weather the storms, which, by the way, is the metaphor for all of us, just starting from different points. So when I started my publishing business, I had segued from performing. So there weren't a lot of roles for me back in the beginning. So I wrote a lot of the work that I did. And then I would stage it, and then somebody would see it, and somebody would offer me something else. And then when that faded, it had its ebb and flow, then I would write something else and stage it, and somebody would see it, and I would get another ping. And it became something that was sort of like a, left foot, right foot, to remind people that I wasn't the last thing you saw me do. I was a compendium of all the things you saw me do and more to come, because that is true of all of us. We are not the one thing we did that we're famous for. Well, I actually did a book called Fame, and in the process of interviewing so many of my kids and a lot of my colleagues at the time, I came across a very interesting little factoid, and that is that fame isn't really something that we own if we're a celebrity, if we're in the public eye. It is what the public owns. It is their impression of who we are. And the more famous we get for one thing, the more difficult it is for people to imagine that we could be more than that we could have other things going on simultaneously. Because the one thing is so big, it looms large, you know? Nobody wonders what the Rolling Stones do in their spare time. Nobody wonders, right? Nobody says, the guy who skied down the Mount Everest, nobody wonders what he does in the warm months. The person who wins the gold medal at the Olympics, whoever won the Super Bowl, unless we're following them daily, we have no idea who else they are, because the one thing becomes the thing. So that's not the story, though. This is my point. When I started my publishing business, I had a slogan, and I still use it. It's a layered slogan. The slogan is this: our stories tell us who we are and all that we can be. They hold the key to our immortality. Our stories don't say, and then they all lived happily ever after. Because the first question that comes to my mind is, after what? Lunch? After the television show that I became the best known for, You Can't Do That on Television, after we stopped shooting, what did I do? I did the next show. I did the next project. I did the next thing. Was it as big? No. No. How could it have been? My goodness, 53 countries around the world. All the U.S. Armed Forces Network dedicated stations. And then when those families came home, there it was on Nickelodeon. And Nick at that point became pay-per-view. So why would they stop showing it? Why would they stop promoting it? And how would I ever compete? Well, I didn't have to. I wasn't trying to be the next version of that. I was doing who I am. And who I am, when I go back to my ancestors, we were famous for many things. As I said, one of them fishing. We were not more bloodthirsty than everybody at the time. It was a very competitive life and a very primitive life at the time. What we were remarkably known for was our storytelling, our craftsmanship, and our navigation tools. Our ability to get where we wanted and needed to go in the most efficient, safe way possible. The reason we became storytellers is that we didn't really have a written language. We had runes, which are basically symbols, like turn left. Sooner than that, that's a cliff. And so it wasn't until almost 1,000 years after the Viking era that people brought in a written language, because so many of the Norse converted to Christianity and people were reading. And then came the sagas. Well, if you tell a story 1,000 years after the event, you might change the events a little. You might not have an eyewitness to verify, yes, it was at 4:30. And so what they became was they became ideas. They became legends. And some of the characters became bigger than they were. And some, very large, were reduced to almost nothing at all. Because that's the nature of storytelling. It evolves. So do the stories. And so do the people the stories are about. So, well, good morning. You're driving. You're listening in the car as I head to Naples. Well, all right, as long as you're only listening. Don't be looking. Good morning, Freddie. And by the way, Maggie, by the way, Freddie, happy Thanksgiving. And to every one of my US friends and fans and family and followers, happy Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful, safe holiday. Freddie was asking me what we do today. And I said, we hope it doesn't snow. We had Thanksgiving in October. The reason we have it earlier is because we would like to have it when the weather is warm enough to enjoy it. We don't really have as much fun enjoying Thanksgiving if it's snowing sideways. It's just a thing, really. So what I'm talking about today, guys, hang on a second. I need another sip. I got a bit of a thing. What I'm talking about today, Gary and I have been discussing this a lot lately. Gary's my producer. What we have been discussing is what our preconceived ideas are doing to our creativity, to our imagination, to our curiosity, to our excitement about finding out what's possible. What little hidden thing are we telling ourselves? What little factoid got anchored in the back of our brains, filed under, uh-oh, don't go there? What is it that we are talking about to ourselves that is undermining our confidence and our ability to say, do I like it? Yes, let's do it. You bet. What is stopping us? What is causing us to second guess? What is that little story? And the way we discover those things, because they're hidden in there, and they're not hidden as words in the subconscious, they're hidden as feeling, emotion-based memory. When we bring it forward, we add the words. But as I had just said about the sagas that were written 1,000 years after the Vikings, we could get the story wrong. We could have misunderstood a word someone said. We could have been walking through a room and we heard part of a conversation. And what we needed to hear to make proper sense of it was the beginning and the end. If all we caught was the middle, that's a 1, 2, 3, that's a 33 and a third % chance of getting it out of context. And sometimes we didn't have the luxury of stopping and saying, wait, what did you just say? Because we could have been 3. We could have been 2. Or we could have been in a hurry. It doesn't matter what shifted our capacity to get it, to understand it. What does matter is that it was possible. So with all the clients, with all the coaching clients that I have, and I've had over the years, coaching actors, coaching business owners, coaching first-time authors, coaching people who want to shift their career paths and their lives, I am that navigator. I am that storyteller. I am that, what's that up ahead? Helping people find their path. Helping people hear a wrong note in the story. For the longest time, I had done the math incorrectly. I had said When I was this old, this happened. And then after that, that happened. It was only important to me. It was only important in terms of figuring out the process, right? But then all of a sudden, I found myself having a conversation with someone who apparently I had spent my very, very early infant years close to, families close by. And I realized that I couldn't have spent time with them if the other story was accurate. It didn't mean that the other story was untrue. It just meant that the dates were off by a bit. Not many. But the uncertainty that I felt when I was listening to the conversation, I thought, wait, what? What do you mean? And I said, what are you talking about? And the story was repeated, that this happened and this happened and this happened. And I said, really? Yeah, don't you remember? No. And then I went home and I asked my parents and they said, oh yeah. And I said, oh, okay. And I walked away and I thought, well, then these two things can't both be true. It doesn't mean that one of them is completely wrong. It means that some of the details are fuzzy, are murky. It wasn't 11:30, it was 4:30. Okay. Doesn't mean that the story itself, it doesn't mean that the trajectory of the path, of the growth, of the change isn't correct. It means that some of the details are murky, lost in time. And that is so important to realize. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it's important today, especially of all days for everyone, and especially for our neighbors to the south in the United States celebrating Thanksgiving. And it's this. We can give thanks that we are. We can forgive tiny gray areas of lack of clarity. We can say, oh, well, if this is true, then this is not what I thought it was. And if I have invested a great deal in what I thought it was, it gives me an opportunity to step back. If what I thought it was unhappy, if what I thought it was limiting, if what I thought it was painful, and some of the details aren't true, are murky, it doesn't mean that my assumptions are wrong. It means that I have permission to let go of things that are holding me back, things that are hurting me, things that were never meant to do that. If I have permission to let go, this iron grasp on it had to be, if I have permission to let that go, think of all the fresh possibilities. If I was convinced beyond any remote doubt that I will never be allowed, that it is never possible for me, and it turns out that that's not accurate, how about that for a gift? How about that for something to be thankful for? How about that for a fresh trajectory, a fresh start on the map, and someplace new to go and do and be. How about that? Usually at that moment, this weird thing happens when we realize this. And that is we start feeling kind of unhappy, which doesn't make any sense unless we realize what we're unhappy about is all the energy and effort, sunk costs we invested. Oh, well, it means we don't have to carry the burden any longer. It means we don't have to invest more in it. It allows us to pull back. 2 weeks ago now, 2.5 weeks, I had to cancel an event that I really had my heart set on. I was going to launch the whole Pivotry in Motion path, pre-launch the books, introduce my speaker concept, introduce the way we're going to be coaching and training and guiding people to better, safer, happier paths. And I had to pull the plug. I had to postpone it because we had a weather alert. And half my speakers were planning to drive quite a long distance. And the last thing I was going to do was put their lives at risk because we were going to have freezing rain. And their long drive was going to be longer with white knuckles. No, I don't think so. That's not the whole point of this. That's exactly the opposite of the whole point of this. That was a hard call to make. The call itself, easy. The letdown. So make the call and then spin in circles, unplugging every aspect of it, making all the phone calls, connecting with all the people, letting every single person know to the best of my ability. Busy. One person was in mid-flight, had to come, certainly wasn't going to turn the plane around. And so here they were in Ottawa with us. So we put that weekend to good use. We did a lot of strategic planning and it was brilliant. It wasn't the dream. And we kept going and we kept working and we kept going. And then Monday, send everybody home, get everything all tidied up. Tuesday, do the video and fall down, crash. Why? Because the wind had stopped. And I had just kept going. And I had just kept the momentum going until every last thing I could think of was done. And then exhaustion and disappointment and all the other attendant things. Happily, I didn't get sick. I just felt quite rotten, really, for about 18 hours. And I slept and I couldn't eat. And it was just a cathartic expulsion of all of the anticipation. If anything had happened to anyone trying to come, and I didn't want that for any of us. And that was the choice. The choice is simple. When we say, stay or go, yay or no, the choice is simple. The sunk cost is what we cling to. It was the sunk cost that made me sick. It didn't have to. I could have said, oh, well. I would have been tired, but I don't think I would have been as just devastated because I had my fingers tightly on that sunk cost vision. And by the way, we all do. The thing about entrepreneurs, the thing about self-starters, the thing about pioneers, the thing about rebels is that if we weren't passionate about it, we wouldn't have started in the first place. You can't tell a rebel to not care so much. I used to have a run-in all the time with the union rep here in Ottawa who who had an attitude about me. Why do you care so much, Hattie? I would say, well, if I don't care, I'm not leaving the house. I don't see, why would I go out and do half of anything? Explain that to me, please. So this is part of what is going on right now. And it's part of what Pivotry in Motion is about. It's part of what the lion effect is about. We are, in fact, leaving the house with our excitement, our curiosity, our tenacity at half-mast. We are grieving the loss of our spontaneity. We are grieving the loss of our innocence that was tarnished in the face of uncertainty. I'm talking about the pandemic, of course. 3.5 years of uncertainty globally. And no one treated for that. There's a study that came out this year, authored in Norway. Authored in Norway. And what they're looking at two things. It's interesting. Behavioral scientists who study the way our bruised feelings, our survival emotions, our very basic rest, reset, recovery capabilities are influenced by trauma, fear, pain, surprise, disaster, all the things that are very large. And they're noticing something. They haven't got the definitive yes or no. It's so interesting, though, when I was reading, I thought, I want to start talking about this. There is a question now that is gaining traction. When they have studied the behavior of prisoners released from long-term incarceration, specifically prisoners who spent many extended periods in solitary confinement, they discover an interesting glitch. If the periods in solitary are long enough and consistent enough, these people who were social misfits in the first place, otherwise they wouldn't be in prison, forget their community skills. They lose their sense of connection. They lose their sense of context. They don't see themselves mirrored in anyone. We learn everything by mirroring, all through our lives. It doesn't stop when we're children. If you have no one to mirror and no mirror to look in, we're blind. When we come out of that extended period and we step into the light and all the people and all the mirrors, we're not ready. We don't have that ease of reconnection, if we ever did. We don't have a natural, hi, I'm back. Our immediate is, what's that? What is it? I don't know. We are back at our most primitive. Familiar is safe. For that person, what is familiar? Isolation. What is safe? Solitude. And the opposite? People. We don't know what to do anymore, if we ever did. We have to begin again. How do we get the help? Sometimes, hopefully, when the person is paroled, they have someone who is mentoring them, someone who is observing them, someone they check in with, some kind of parole officer, some kind of guidance, some kind of social services, unless that system is overwhelmed, unless the person falls through the cracks, unless the individual is so damaged they reoffend, subconsciously wanting to get back to the last place they felt safe. Because if they've been gone long enough, society is not their world anymore. Right? That makes sense? Okay. What they're looking at is all the rather alarming similarities that people living in, forced in, solitary confinement circumstances, on again, off again, on again, off again, throughout the duration of COVID. They don't know which mirror to look in. They don't know which set of rules to believe. They don't know who to trust. They don't know if something invisible is dangerous, if it's safe. And the difference, the big difference, is that there is no automatic treatment available for everyone on the planet after COVID ended. There is no protocol of this is what we do. There is no story written that we tell each other to feel like we are part of something. I was talking to a very, very wise person the other night who said the tendency to say it's another trauma can be convenient. Yes, it can. However, the inability to say anything can be worse. If we all immediately assume that if we had to stay home, if we all immediately assumed that we weren't allowed to go to school, that we weren't allowed to go to work, that we weren't allowed to connect and communicate and collaborate with our people, if we can all agree that the businesses that closed and the people we lost, that knowledge would stay with us forever. If we can all agree that those are true and real and valuable pieces of information, dots to connect, then it suddenly makes sense that people are phoning it in. That people, each individual person, is like a tiny ship, struggling to make headway because our sails are at half mast. We are in mourning. We're not merely mourning the loss of the loved one or the colleague or the neighbor or the friend or the business or the life we knew. We're mourning our loss of our innocence. We're mourning our loss of certainty. That it's not going to go back to the way it was because nothing ever does. But we're not sure that it's going to go forward to a place that is safe because it's new. So we're muscling up, we're leaning in, we're doing the best. And sometimes we can feel the loss, that it isn't our excellence. It's our best in this moment, not the best that ever was. And so now I'm going to bring us back to the whole idea of the story. Our stories tell us who we were. Our stories tell us who we are. And our stories tell us who we can be because of our infinite possibilities. That's not an easy task to wrap our heads around on a Thursday where there's sleet in the forecast. That's not an easy task to wrap our heads around when we're tired. We just like it simple. Gary's got a head cold. Head colds get no sympathy, right? Because it's a head cold, for heaven's sake. But when you've got a head cold, you're 3 and you want a hug and a blanket and you want soup and you don't want to have to make any decisions. Not today, right? And so what I really want you to see through your eyes, through your filter, is that we have permission to forgive ourselves for our bad days. We have our permission to say, whatever that was, I hope I don't see it again soon. We have permission to say, I think I'm going to take a few more minutes under the covers. We have permission to write a note to ourselves and say, and then tomorrow, I'll be back because I want to add new details to this story. People say and do the most remarkably stupid things. There are times, I have always really secretly felt that I just open my mouth and stuff comes out. There's somebody in the back handing it out saying, here, say that. And a lot of the time, luckily, whoever that is fairly clever, quick, However, periodically, I get the feeling that whoever that is goes on a break and it's their not very bright third cousin who's in there handing me out stuff. And I open my mouth and I think, what the hell did I just say? Who's in there? And we deserve to cut us some slack for those moments. We deserve to say, I made a stupid decision the other day, and I am so sorry. Say it to us first, and then say it to the people we love. Say it to the people who didn't do anything to deserve. And knit the fabric of our tapestry. Fill in the gaps. I want to tell you something. Susan and I were talking at great length the other day. Susan's amazing. I led Susan by the hand to write 5 books. And she is still pinching herself in wonderment that she managed to do it while she was back at school raising 3 children during COVID. And I just said, keep going. Don't pay attention. Keep going. Don't touch anything. Just keep going. Don't breathe on anybody. Don't let them breathe on you. Just keep going. We came out the other side and she said, what was that? And I said, I know, right? Welcome to being an author. And she said, dear God, I may not write a book for a while. We were talking about the ways in which people do thoughtless things unthinkingly. The way we miss those ahas. And the way we learn to say, I'm so sorry. And also in those moments, when we realize that the people we thought were with us, like us, part of us, were not. And we have those ahas and think, oh, well, okay. All right. 2 paths diverge in the yellow wood all the time. And it's not that I'm suggesting at this moment that we don't take ourselves seriously. I'm suggesting in this moment that we give ourselves permission to be imperfect, to be human, to wander off the path. Look up and say, oh, and rather than stand there and say, I'm doomed, no, find your way back. Call for help. Because the path is where the living is. It's where the excitement is. It's where the change and growth are waiting for us. Once upon a time, Vikings drank the blood of their enemies out of their empty skulls. Today, they sell furniture in flat boxes. And they are as mighty as they ever were because they lived to fight another day and thrive, not just survive. And on this Thanksgiving Day, I suggest we do that too. I suggest we all embrace our inner Viking and find new ways to celebrate. What do you think? Are you in the boat? I hope so. Okay. 45 minutes. I'm getting it down. I'm getting it down to a manageable length. I want to thank you so much for watching. I want to thank you for making this part of your day. I want to thank you for telling your friends and for growing this and being my sounding board and my ripple effect. Without you, it's just a rehearsal. In fact, that's what life is without you. It's a rehearsal for the real thing. So remember to be good to you. You deserve it. Remember to hug your loved ones because they deserve it too. And I will catch you next time.